Phasedragon, and I've been doing VRChat World development for a few years now. I've done many different projects collaborating with many different people. But almost exactly a year ago, I got roped into working on Callous Row Season 2. This talk is going to be a chronological account of effectively a dev diary of problems, solutions, and lessons learned along the way. It's also going to have a lot of videos. I hope that this talk doesn't come across as bragging, because there is so much material to cover that there is no way I can dive into the specifics enough to make it a tutorial. This is not going to be a tutorial. This is just some of the design decisions that we went with and how that turned out. Not all of those decisions were even good. Some were awful, some were meh, and some were forced upon us by tech debt. But by all means, if you take this as a template, then pick and choose what you think worked best for your situation. If you have any specific questions about anything here, I will be leaving plenty of time for them at the end. But even outside of today, I assure you I am very susceptible to nerd sniping, so by all means, ask away at any time. So, first things first, you might be wondering, what even is Callous Row? Alright. So if you're not familiar with it, Callus Row is a multiplayer open-world role-playing game where everyone you see is a real person. There are dungeon masters who orchestrate storylines, manage the players, make rolls, and determine what happens. This all takes place inside a cyberpunk fantasy universe where there are cybernetic augmentations, mushroom people, aliens, hackers, mages, and gigantic megacorps that casually purchase entire planets. It's inspired by the tabletop RPG Shadowrun, however, beyond that core concept, it goes its own direction entirely. This entire project is spearheaded by Arcadum. He designed the universe, he is the head DM, and he also provides funding so that the developers can spend more time on it. Kier is the primary world creator. He lays out the maps and gets everything together. At the end of the day, he is the one uploading the worlds. We use a lot of polygon assets, but Sketchu brings everything up a notch with custom art and modeling. Gambit helps in a few areas, like programming and map design for missions. I do most of the VRChat programming. Simon is our web developer who handles the bots, the website, and the database. There are about half a dozen other assistant developers who come in and out working on audio, art, modeling, and a bit of programming. We have about 8 dungeon masters who handle day-to-day operations when Arcadum can't be there. And then there is 150 players. 100 of those stream live on Twitch every Friday. Shared between all of them, they've gotten up to 40,000 live viewers at one point. Currently, Callous Row is wrapping up its second season, and I wasn't even involved in the first season, so this talk is primarily about Season 2. Let's just let the video finish here. Went a little bit quick.
That's about a world.
Is this a one world?
No, multiple.
We'll get to that. Alright, so, Season 1 was a single map with about 40 players. Pretty early after Season 1 finished, it was decided that they wanted more players involved. Keeping everyone at a usable frame rate in a complex map means you're limited to around 40 to 50 players, so obviously the solution was multiple maps. And in order to transfer between maps, we put a bot account on every map, set the bots to blue status, and they'll accept any invites automatically. Really, this is a pretty obvious solution, but it's the basis for a lot of more exciting stuff we'll talk about later. What might not be an obvious solution is that we're actually running these bots on Amazon EC2 virtual machines. It adds some more time to set up at first, and it costs money, but it really does pay off when you need 4 to 5 of these running simultaneously. So one of the problems that we had was that the wasteland is a gigantic desert. It's way too big to walk on foot, so the whole point was to travel it by vehicle. And this is exactly the reason why I joined the project in the first place, as I just could not resist the challenge of making a good vehicle. Nerd sniping, effectively. Kier DM'd me asking about it, and I had nothing going on at that point. Just finished up Hook Junkers, so I figured, why not? There are so many different ways to do vehicles, but because these are hovering, I was able to get away with a very simple method. I'm sure Vanian can tell you how hard it is to work with wheel colliders. But here, basically all I did was raycast down and apply a force upwards. The closer the raycast gets, the more force it applies, and because each hoverpod is equally distributed from the center of mass, when they apply force, it will automatically level out the vehicle. Each hoverpod also pivots to face directly down, which helps a lot with going up slopes. They can only pivot so far, and any further will cause them to lock up, which causes it to naturally slide down when a slope is too steep. Early on, actually, the vehicle would get all of its movement from these hoverpods, and they would pivot around to turn and push in the direction you wanted to go, including rotation. It was really cool to see them moving around like that, kind of like the thrusters on Star Citizen, but I scrapped it because when you pivot to thrust in a certain direction, that takes away from the force you're using to push down, and that results in a dip every time you started moving. It also didn't interact with slopes very well, so now I'm just applying a raw force and torque according to your direct input. And at this point in time, avatars were rock solid in moving stations, so I was inspired to go all out with the controls. I actually bought full body for the sole purpose of making working foot pedals. I don't think anybody actually uses these foot pedals regularly, despite a significant number of them using full body, but it's cool to have the option available. At this point in the project, we were in June of 2020, before VRChat added voice settings to Udon. In Season 1, they used voice regions for Dungeon Masters to make announcements to everyone on the map, and this was a very important feature. So, without official support, our only option was to try something janky. Let's see how it went. So, when you sat in this station, it would move the station locally behind everybody, so you'd be able to talk to them wherever they were. This actually did sort of work as long as you were within 25 meters of the speaker, but as soon as you got outside 25 meters, you would actually stop hearing them altogether because even though their volume would have been audible, you stopped receiving voice data from them. For a period of time, I experimented with two-way calls because technically, if both clients think they're within range, they will actually send voice data back and forth. But it was very messy, and I did not like the direction that was going in. I believe at this point, some canny was marked as in progress, so we knew proper support was on the horizon. Instead, I decided to just wait for VRChat to add voice options, and then they did. We didn't even have to wait that long, and after struggling on my end to get voice data to transmit, I was all the more impressed with how their implementation just works, even if it's completely desynced on purpose. Once we had this, I decided to go way beyond just DM broadcast. So the system that I built for Callous Row has whisper, talk, yell, radio, and broadcast. Whisper originally just lowered your voice range, but the long exponential tail made it hard to know who could actually hear you. After some feedback from the players, I made it an instant cutoff beyond 2 meters and added a visual ring to indicate who was in range. I wanted yell to be heard from 50 meters away, but again, that long tail made things difficult. If it was boosted to easy to hear levels at 50 meters, then it would still be faintly audible off at 500 meters. So I did some tweaking with the gain to kind of force it into a linear curve. Radio is pretty simple. It has 50 channels, and if you're on the same channel as someone, you can hear each other anywhere. And of course, broadcast. Everybody can hear you across the map for DMs. So,
I can't hear you. What?
So you can see switch to yell,
What if I don't want to?
and then I switch to yell.
I'll get on radio.
It's pretty quiet. Are we able to boost the volume at all? I think it'll work now.
You can raise the
Anyway.
volume, but that's about it.
Yeah, that's alright though.
Alright, so you want me to go to the radio and then you just
Alright.
fly away from me?
Wow. We're on the radio. We can hear each other.
Alright.
I don't know.
Anyway, now, next problem. Oh wait, actually, no, sorry, I completely skipped something. So this system had a few growing pains. Voice is such an incredibly important aspect that when it screws up, it has a huge impact. So if you want to touch this kind of system, I will give this advice. Number 1, test it over and over again. Make sure it is rock solid before your event. Number 2, have an option to disable it entirely. straight up destroy the game objects if you have to. When your system screws up and sets somebody to broadcast on accident or locks them so that you can't hear them, you need a panic button.
Well, you can switch
So basically,
nearby.
I skipped again. Alright, let's see.
Well, you
There we go.
Perspectives from.
No. Why can I not? Okay,
Saw it.
there we go. Alright, we're back on track. Okay, so basically, this is an event that happens once a week. There's 4 hours per session, and after adding so many people, 100 of them stream on Twitch. That's 400 hours of content a week. And if you're doing the math, a week only has 168 hours. So obviously that's going to be problematic. One of the people working on this project, Simon, is a web developer, so he got to work on creating an interactive website that allows you to view perspectives more fluidly. I'm sure the development of that website is an entire talk all on its own, but I will share a little bit about my involvement at least. The bots in every instance actually do a lot more than just invites. First, there is an Udon script in the world that takes the position and sends of everyone in the player and sends it to the debug log in JSON format. Each bot has a Python script on it that reads the logs and sends it off to the web server. Then the server takes everybody's position, puts it on a map, links it to their streams, and you can get magic like this.
You could switch perspectives from nearby icons. Hold on. Okay, so go back to red.
Oh, if they need any magic spells, I know.
What's your magic do?
No fucking way, dude! Holy shit!
I'll give you all a drink.
Bro!
Or sit down here and I'll give you all a drink.
So, let's see. Alright, so next up, props are very important to roleplay. Even now, most roleplay groups still haven't moved to Udon simply because it is absolutely critical to have spawnable props, and that is not easy to do in Udon. So, I built a whole system I call Prop Library. Thankfully, the networking update makes it way easier, but before that, I was actually doing some bitwise operations in order to convert two 64-bit integers into a 128 bool array. Each of the 128 props were able to transform into any template, all the templates were stored in a game object somewhere, and at start, the prop library would scan through the entire list of templates to copy all the details into arrays. That included, I lost myself. Then each of the props had a synced integer that represented which template it currently was. This had several drawbacks. Spawning a prop took forever because first you had to sync which props were enabled, and then the prop had to sync its position. That whole process could take as long as 10 seconds before the networking update. The second drawback was that because the template was synced by the prop itself, it was very common for props to transform right in front of someone's eyes when it transferred ownership.
Look it. It's very pretty. Oh, you have cake on you. Where's the crystal?
Is it in me?
Did it? Wait,
did it turn
did you
into
have a
cake?
cake? Did it turn into cake? This cake is alive.
Cake is alive.
So, after Unu came out, I completely ripped out most of it. Oh. Yeah. So after Unu came out, I completely ripped out most of it and replaced it with a U-short array, which is so much better. Now the master has complete authority over what each object is, which speeds up spawn times and improves reliability. It's been a while since I touched the part where a prop is able to transform into any template, but I think if I was going to refactor it, I would completely get rid of the part where it transforms itself before instantiating a child. It's just very messy because you have to keep a dozen arrays of what mesh it has, what type of collider it has, what scale it is, what scale its collider is. The list goes on. This plan originally came about because I naively thought that I wouldn't even need to instantiate anything. Wow, what a wonderful world that would have been. But no, you're going to have to instantiate something, and honestly I think you'd be much better off if you just admitted that to yourself from the start. I kind of just pushed that entire system off into its own little black box for now, but someday I'll revisit it. Okay. No. There we go. Whatever, let it play.
One too many times.
It's fine. Alright, so something that quickly came up was that it was very awkward to just hold everything all the time, and this was the original reason behind making Udon Pockets, a system that, well, gave you pockets. One of the problems here is that VRChat pays special attention to object synced pickups that are actually being held. They end up having exactly the same latency so that when you're moving around, they will actually be in your hand instead of floating behind you. When you put stuff in your pockets, this would go away and they would just float behind you. To combat this, I decided not to use object sync. Instead, I have a bunch of continuous sync variables, including an integer, which represents which bone the prop is attached to. When it's attached to a bone, the synced position corresponds to a local position instead. And because it transitions between local to global space, I can't just mark those variables as smooth sync. I had to actually do my own interpolation code. And going all through all that trouble was another case that just made me appreciate VRChat all the more. Seriously, good interpolation is very hard, and VRChat's object sync is very good. I really wish I could make use of it. Another cool thing that we did with Pockets is more heavy integration with the bots. Unfortunately, I didn't do a whole video for this, but basically, when you leave a world, the prop will instantly despawn and be logged to the bot. Then that object will be stored in the database, and the next time you join any world, the bot will send commands to spawn a prop, and that prop will reattach to exactly the same spot.
Ooh.
Oh, nice.
Another problem was that before I showed up, Dungeon Masters were just ordinary players with an invisible avatar. I felt this was a real shame, so I wanted to give them all kinds of powers to do stuff. Enter Udon Shell. Udon Shell is what I'm calling my command system. It is extremely flexible and allows for sending commands like teleporting players around or launching effects. A lot of inspiration came from Minecraft commands. So you can do things like add two positions together and divide them by 2 to get the average position. Or use special symbols like tilde to create coordinates in local space of some object or player. It also has shortcuts, so @S means self, @A means all players, and I threw in my own concept of focus. So I could select a group of players and then use @F to use that group as the target of a command. One of the things I'm most proud about is how it has an autocomplete system, and all the different ways you access it will actually use the exact same autocomplete. You give it a string, it gives you a string array of suggestions, and you choose what to do with those suggestions. First, it has a desktop terminal where you can start typing and then hit tab to accept the first suggestion. Then it has a VR panel that presents you with a grid of all the possibilities.
Very cool.
And then it even has a component you can add in Editor with a full custom inspector. This was great for a map designer to add specialized behavior like jump pads without me needing to make a custom script. The only problem was accessing that power is complicated. I should have realized it sooner, but basically the short-term solution kinda forced us into make Phasedragon do everything. Yeah, I was the only one who could use it in real time. Anytime the DMs needed anything, I had to help them. So for a while I just shouted Arcadum around and he would tell me what he wanted. Teleport me to that player, teleport me to that player, or teleport that player to me, etc. Simon even built a god console that allowed me to send commands from a web browser out to any map by passing it through the bots. Then the DMs just had to hop into my Discord channel, ask for a prop, and it would be on the way no matter what map they were on. Now, no. Here's an example of where there's a bunch of extras they're fighting, and as soon as they die, I have to respawn them. And I was running around teleporting them to where they need to be, and it was extremely hectic. Now, don't get me wrong, this was fun, exhausting, but very fun. It works great for teleporting around extras, but the biggest downside perhaps was that I didn't know when a DM would want a particular effect to happen, or if they even wanted an effect at all, right in the middle of their big monologue. So, of course, I can't do everything, and I realized I needed to put more power directly into the hands of the DMs. Thus, I created the concept of quick actions. Quick actions were a way for me to add commands to someone's voice menu, and they can do them whenever they want. And that could be things like particle effects, teleportation, any command that Udon Shell supported. In practice, half the time I would queue up a quick action, and then I'd tell the DM what I've given to them, and they'd be like, just do it now. It didn't work for DMs most of the time, though actually just this last Friday it did get some good use. But obviously this was not the complete solution. So either way, it was not the solution that we needed. Take two, the quick panel. The quick panel just took all the most common functions and put them in one place with a single click. You can use this panel to teleport around players, summon players, focus players, and a couple other things. It even had a watch function that would make a camera show players from afar in a split screen. There have been many times where a DM was in character with one group of players, and they would be making roles for another group of players on the other side of the map. Overall, the quick panel helped DMs be much more comfortable with doing things themselves, and it also provides a more gradual transition when they are ready to move on to the full panel. I think this is a really good lesson in how you can create the most powerful system in the world, but if it's not easy to use, then you're the only person who will use it. I thought it was easy to use, but I'm the one who made it. As game developers, we make things that other people interact with, and that's why testing and feedback is so important. If people don't get it, it's okay to dumb it down a little bit. At this point, I realized that props are quite dull. I didn't really want to start putting Udon behaviors on the children to create unique behavior for each template, so instead I wanted a generic system to add nearly any feature to any prop. So this is another thing that could be its own talk entirely, but you can do so much with parameters. You can change the scale, you can change the layer, you can change whether it can be picked up, etc. Here's a video of one of the first times people saw this in action, coming up soon. You can see, I don't think, yeah, it's really light text here, so you probably can't see it very well with the bloom, but that's spying a sniper rifle with like 0.8 scale or something was. And here's a video of the first time people saw it in action.
It's a big ass gun. You see, guys, this is what is waiting for you if you don't listen to us, okay?
What kind of caliber would that be?
And aside from just changing visible properties, they are literally command blocks. At one point, I gave a special gun to a DM that when they shot it, a specific prop would be teleported to where they hit. Then there was another prop in the spawn room, which was a teleporter pad. You walk onto the pad and be teleported to wherever the DM shot their gun. We had a dozen extras playing generic guards that could then pour out of anywhere at a moment's notice. This was super powerful because the number one thing about RP is that it's all improv. You need to be flexible. You need to be able to react to the situation. Sure, it would be pretty simple to make a brand new Udon script that does all that and then re-upload the world. But re-uploading worlds this big can take half an hour each. Having parameters means I was able to just make the thing right there on the spot. It's all about production value. Another issue we had was that DMs kind of had to wander around looking for what's happening, or players would have to go and find the Discord channel where their DM was. It wasn't a very elegant solution, so I wanted to do something about it. I added the DM ping system, which allows players to say, hey, I need something, and then a panel would pop up on a DM screen. They had a few options like teleporting, telling them to wait, or pulling them into a DM radio where nobody else could hear them. Early on, I heard from DMs a lot that, oh man, I was DM this entire episode. I didn't get to play my character. So a side goal was to give the DMs more time to be their character. The real answer to that is just have more DMs, and now we do have at least 2 per map, but I think that the ping system helped at least a little bit with that respect. So, the quick panel earlier helped with all the basic functions, and we ran on that for a long time, but as the DM started to get more comfortable with it, they started touching the full panel. And the problem is, whenever you try to launch an effect, you have to define a location or a person. Sure, you could technically whip out a keyboard and type in coordinates, and I personally did that all the time. But it was not a reasonable expectation for DMs. So another thing that I added quite recently was the admin gun. It allows you to load commands onto it and then launch those commands with just a click. The admin gun uses the concept of replacement tags. So when you load a command onto it, you say $player, $position, or $hit. Depending on what it has loaded, it will show you either a dot on the ground where you're pointing, or an arrow over someone's head. Then when it actually sends the command, it doesn't have to have like a synced vector 3 or anything. It just replaces the $hit with some coordinates and sends it along as if it was any other command you typed into the console. It works pretty well, and it got a lot of use in the episode from just this Friday. I wish I could have added some video from that, but it was after the deadline. It was only 2 days ago.
Neat.
Now again, we run into my old nemesis, usability. I explained earlier about how awesome parameters were, right? Well, yeah, that has the exact same issue as the full panel. It's even more complicated because parameters are in JSON format due to the database, and my autocomplete is not compatible with JSON. So, lucky for me, I just recently made the admin gun. Let's just slide in another tab there. So I added a tab that puts all the properties on sliders. I think it works pretty well, and in addition, the admin gun had other stuff like moving props around. It was very helpful. So if you're not familiar with how characters work in a roleplay, they all have character sheets. This details things like their skill points, their race, their augmentations, their magic levels, stuff like that. And because we have 150 characters across 4 maps, it is very common for a character from the upper city to go wandering around in the wasteland, and then the DM of the wasteland has no idea who they are. So I wanted to improve that whole situation. But where to put it? If only I had a very convenient tool to point and click at people. Slap it on the admin gun.
Nice.
The cool part of this is that it is actually pulling from a Google Sheet by way of the bot. None of this is built into the world, so it's very easy to update. Effectively, I have one command on my side that says request player info, and then the bot has another command on its side that says send player info, and that's it. That is the end of everything that I have prepared. Does anyone have any questions?
Wow.
Ooh.
Wow.
Very good, very good.
All right, I think Cellbug has a question.
Yeah, let's boot up the question zone. So if you want to ask a question, please come here and ask a question so everybody on stream can hear
I
you.
was speaking that.
I think we should move the question zone eventually.
Sounds like
Everyone
we
knows what's
front
wrong.
row team if you want to be on Aeon or the other side.
Anybody wants to ask
Who's
any
first?
questions?
I have many questions, but it's like
Yeah, go, hop over to the question zone.
okay.
Crap.
All right.
I went. What's next for this then?
What's next? Well, I kind of hinted a little bit. I want to revamp the prop system, the way that I'm transforming props. I think Panda has a way better way of doing it. However, I'm not going to do the whole reparenting thing because I don't need to, because I'm not using Object Sync. Unless VRChat adds that thing that I was talking about with Object Sync, then I might have to do the reparenting stuff. So we'll see. But I definitely want to improve that whole system. And really, I'm adding all new kind of stuff all the time. Like all these videos are just videos that I dumped into the development team from our Discord, and I just searched like from Phasedragon has videos, and I just keep adding more stuff. So I don't know, whatever I come up with next, I'll have an idea from something. I don't know. Rubik?
Question. Since you have the old roleplay element, and I'm guessing that some of the stories are built ahead of time, or at least some of the interactions, I was wondering, how does you building tools affect the generating the gameplay and the interactions between people? Because I assume if you suddenly have a new tool, it allows admins to do more, and so how does that tie into the gameplay?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. Yeah, so that's actually something that basically Cure designs the maps, and he decides, what's the flow and where are the spawn points and stuff like that, and then there's this great theory about what's going to happen, and then in real time it kind of ends up being like the DMs just want a certain thing to happen because they thought of it on the spot, or they're reacting to something that happened, and it needs to be much more improvisational than that, and that's where my systems fill in that gap there, basically. So pretty much when it comes to, for example, in the final boss fight of last night, or last Friday, Arcadum wanted a bunch of zombies to come pouring down from the roof, and Kier didn't set up a spawn point on the roof. Why would he do that? So I because of the tool that I gave to the DM who was handling spawns, he was able to just make it happen. And that's an example of where improv kind of takes over in the moment, and everybody is just doing everything they can to make it work.
Thank you.
Okay, so like this is clearly like a very huge scale, and I'm wondering like what type of things do you do to make sure that when you're testing that it'll still like work when the actual scale of Callous Row is in place? Yeah, that is very difficult, and by all means, we've screwed up several times. Like there have been several cases, including just last night, where our entire voice system didn't work, and we just had to go without it. And really, the only thing you can do is to get like a good group of players to test a couple days before, because there is no personally, I'm very comfortable with simulating 2 clients, 3 clients, 4 clients, however many I need to make sure that something technically works. However, there is no way to simulate 30 people clicking buttons all simultaneously, or someone being in Australia. Well, maybe there is to do that, but not the point. And so it's very difficult. And one example in particular, just last night, just last Friday, the reason why it broke was because I had disabled a bunch of the objects for the object pool that he's used for assigning like the voice stuff to each player, and as a result, only the first 3 people who joined were able to actually use the voice system, and that's just not. And I only launched 3 clients because I thought, hey, that covers all the situations. It covers master, non-master, late joiners, a non-master observing an owner's behavior, all kinds of stuff. But that. Yeah, I completely screwed myself there. So it's just I gotta do a lot of testing, and I am certainly guilty of not doing enough myself. So next up.
So in your example, so I have not watched Callous Row, I don't know anything about it, but just for, you have a player versus player combat, you say the DMs are doing dice rolls for people. How much of those like core system mechanics are built into the world versus manually handled by the DM per each encounter? And Is that like, how is that working, and how would you change that system?
So the whole system is kind of in flux because it's because realistically, combat kind of just worked even before we had anything Udon related. Like, there are roleplay groups that have particles on their avatar, and they just roleplay, and they get hit, and they're in full body, so they make big falls, and it's all fun and stuff. But I kind of wanted to do something about it to improve the hit detection. So I did actually make a favor the shooter combat system, and that combat system doesn't actually apply damage to the players. It's not like they have a health bar, because that would be too restricting, right? Like if a DM, we might have a health bar at some point, but it'll still be very fluid. It might be more like the overlays in like Call of Duty, where you can see red blood spots coming in. It wouldn't be like an actual 100 to 0 kind of bar. And really, it's just something that you got to be flexible with. So instead, all I do is when you get hit, you get a red overlay. And I actually added a thing pretty recently where whenever you do get hit, it sends it to the debug log, and then after the combat, you can read the log and see this player got shot 20 times, this player got shot 15 times, oh, this player got shot by a special gun, ooh, that means they dealt more damage, stuff like that. And that kind of helps a little bit, but it's not really necessary either. At the end of the day, the way that the DMs do it is they have a series of wounds. So they have minor wounds, major wounds, and death rolls. I think I'm not a DM, so I haven't actually done that myself. I'm not entirely sure how that works. But the idea is that certain types of wounds cannot result in a death, even if you roll a natural one. You might just have to recover for a couple days, and then you go walking around with a crutch, for the next couple sessions. You have to add a crutch to your avatar. That's kind of fun for some people that get to create their own avatars. They can add scars and stuff like that. Whereas death rolls are what happens when something really significant happened, and then the dungeon master evaluates the situation, and they say, okay, if I roll above a 4, you're good. If I roll above a 6, you're good on a D10. And then they do it, and either the character lives or dies. And that's just how it works. So,
follow-up question: are they literally rolling in real life, or do you have a dice system?
In some cases, for very, very special things, they'll make a whole show out of pulling out their physical dice. Some of them even have like metal dice. But most of the times, no. They just have a particle on their avatar that they click a button and it just like randomizes a texture, and then they get the thing. And they've tested it, and I'm confident that it's also fully random, even though it's only pseudo random. But it's definitely random enough.
Yeah, I have a clarification on that from a DM in chat who says that for those who are not in the know, they have dice rollers on the avatars, and they apply discretion from context and the rolled outcome along with the systems that are built into the world.
Who is that in chat?
So that was from Ariana, I think.
Oh, Ariana, that's one of our the city, the row DMs. Yeah.
Yeah. There we go. Also, I guess I can quickly ask a question from chat as well, because we have a lot of people in here, and chat wants some stuff as well. So the question was, how do you get the data back into the world to perform actions?
So that's a little bit tricky, because it's easy to, so basically the bots have a Python script, and it's very easy for Python script to just read a file, but if you want to send it back in, that would be a great use case for OSC, but we don't have that at the moment. So instead, they have to focus the window and then paste like text into an input field. And then I have a script running which keeps that input field focused, so that they always paste it and it'll always go in. And I just recently upgraded that system, so it was much more reliable, and it always keeps focused. Before, I don't know why I thought this was a good idea, but I had it so that the bot would have to press / to start a command, and then it would paste it, and then it would press enter, which is awful, and the bot's commands only went through like 80% of the time. So I very recently upgraded it so that literally all it has to do is paste, and then the script will just automatically detect, oh, there's text here, let's send that as a command. So yeah.
Also, one little thing: if Arcadium is also in the chat, and the Arcadium,
Hey.
is, the person who runs the whole thing. So if you have any questions, you can just go into YouTube chat and ask anything. They're very eager to tell everybody that
there you go.
they can answer anything. So.
I guess. One small
Alright,
question: is there a tool? I was over there. Came back. A small question: is there a tool that you want to make, or admins would like in the world, but that you can't make yet, and why?
Specific tool. I honestly, I don't really have a whole lot on my to-do list. Usually when I think of something to do, then I just make it pretty immediately. Or it just goes on the backlog and I can totally make it. I just haven't had the time to do it. I don't really have anything that I particularly, I guess this is not necessarily something a VRChat has a problem with, but it's just my implementation. I really want the admin gun to be able to pick up players, but because the admin gun is not a synced pickup, it is entirely local. It would be really awkward and complicated to do that. So, yeah.
Okay.
Dogan. Yeah.
Oh, there we go. All right. One, what GitHub is all this stuff on? And two, if it's not, who do we have to extort to make that happen?
So,
Yes.
unfortunately, yeah, it's not available publicly. Basically, yeah, that's something that I have to figure out with Arcade Hub. I'd love to release this stuff at some point, but there's the problem is that he paid for it to make it happen, and number two is that it's tied very deeply into the project itself, and so it's all one gigantic project that we're using Colab for. I hope to change that to like something else, yeah, in the season break. But yeah, at some point that needs to be ripped out and separated into its own thing. Maybe once we have another program to collaborate, that will help. All right. Any other questions? We only got 3 minutes left, so we got room for one or two more. Mm-hmm.
Oh, my question was answered by Logan's question. Basically, it's
all right.
Okay.
Yeah, that was also my question.
Oh, we got another question from Panda, maybe? No, just repositioning. Okay. All right. I think we're done here then.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank you very much for coming.